And so this brings us to our third paper by Monzur Hossain, COVID-19, Agglomeration Economies and Firm Recovery, Evidence from Bangladesh, with his colleagues at the Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies. So, Monzur.
Yeah. Can you see my slides?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. It's a very good morning from Bangladesh. It is almost late night. Okay. Anyway, so in this paper, in fact, we were trying to examine different aspects of farm recovery, particularly SMEs in Bangladesh, who are based in industrial clusters. So our main objective is to see whether cluster or agglomeration economies, how it helps farms to recovery during the pandemic, and particularly in different types of modes of restrictions. So this is the paper which I have written with my colleague Tahrin. She's also here. So the basic outline of the presentation is, first of all, is the context of the paper, and then motivation, objectives, survey, data, estimation methodology, and results, and finally some concluding remarks and policy aspects. Okay. Yeah. The main context is that, as we know, that micro, small, and medium enterprises were affected severely worldwide during this pandemic because of their low access to capital, their opaqueness, and many other issues. And since many governments have been imposing lockdown and restrictions on mobility, so these farms, particularly smaller farms, suffered heavily. In Bangladesh, there is no exception, and this is the situation in Bangladesh too. So, well, in Bangladesh also, SMEs have been receiving some stimulus packages from the government, and apart from that, we thought that what other issues, structural issues, could have helped this kind of farms in their recovery process. As you understand, the industrial clusters provide very special and other benefits to farms. Does this facilitate faster recovery of the farms? This is the one objective that we examine in this paper. So farms in industrial cluster, particularly those who target local markets for sourcing raw materials and selling products, are supposed to face fewer difficulties during country-wide movement restriction. So this has motivated us to check whether this really works in favor of the recovery in the pandemic. We therefore asked the question, does the performance of the cluster-based farms vary with their market operation orientation access during COVID? We are also interested to examine the variation of performances with the variation of gravity of movement restrictions during the lockdown, because many governments use different types of movement restrictions in different phases during the pandemic. In this paper, particularly, we are talking about the last half of the 2020, when after first round of the first wave of COVID pandemic. Okay. We particularly select sample farms from one very oldest industrial estates or clusters, which is known as BSIC, Bangladesh Small and Cottage Industries Corporation. This is a state-owned enterprises who has been running the industrial estates in Bangladesh. So one of the objectives of establishing these estates was to exploit the local area business potentials, particularly for inclusive industrialization across the countries, so that small farms can get additional benefits from these estates. So degree of agglomeration benefits that definitely varies across farms and farms. Based on their heterogeneity of farms. So we therefore examine the recovery span of cluster-based farms with different level of agglomeration benefits during COVID-19. We tested two specific, there are various, as you know, the agglomeration benefits, and we did not compare with the non-cluster farms. Here we have surveyed only the cluster farms. So we tried to examine only two specific agglomeration benefits, that is locational benefits, that is whether local market orientation in terms of sourcing raw materials and selling products. As you understand that during limited restrictions or even lockdown, it is possible for the farms to source raw materials from their local towns or local economy by using or small vehicles or others. So it was very much possible for them to use or exploit this kind of opportunities to continue their production even during lockdown or restrictions. So this is what we have tried to examine in this paper. This is just a snapshot of COVID infection cases in 2020. The first case was detected in Bangladesh in March 26, 2020. Then you see it started picking up in the middle of June, end of June, and then it started declining and until December 31st. And also after in the first quarter of 2021, then it started again. It faced the second wave of COVID outbreak. Okay, so we did a survey of over 216, in fact 216 farms during January to March 2021 from selected 16 basic industrial estates in Bangladesh. But we had to abandon the survey due to second wave of COVID that started in early March 2021. So initially we thought that it would not come, but finally, as you know, that the second wave started in many countries in many times. So that is happened in Bangladesh too. So we had to stop physical survey of farms during that time. So why did we do this survey of 216? Because we have done similar survey of these farms in 2017 for other purposes to see the other aspects of the basic industrial estate. So we used the same sampling framework for this survey also. We visited the same farm that we visited in 2017. We thought that we would continue until completing the 500 farms to assess the recovery during that one recovery from the COVID outbreak, but unfortunately we could not finish the survey. So far 216 farms is not a bad sample in terms of industrial survey. We collect information particularly on losses and recovery of farms during lockdown that was lasted in March to May 2020 and subsequent periods of limited lockdown that was even June to September, and from October to December it was complete reopened. So these 3 periods we tried to assess whether there is any variation in farms recovery based on the variation in lockdown or restrictions. As we say, I already said that the sampling framework was based on our earliest survey, and the survey data in COVID-19 pandemic are merged with some characteristics of 2017 survey to control some state and industrial characteristics. Okay, this is the basic sample characteristics. As you see that the ratio of different sectors, sectoral representation is almost same or reflected similarly in our survey also in 2021. So for example, agro-food processing is share of units is 28% in 2017 survey. In our 2021 survey is about 23%. Similarly, textile proportion was 34, but here 30%. So almost similar representation in our current survey. Here is some descriptive statistics I want to show you. So as we also collect the information on average decrease in production, percentage decrease, sales and profit after outbreak of COVID-19 compared to 2029 pre-COVID level production and sales and profit. As you see during lockdown, when it was a strict lockdown, in fact, April to May or March to May, 57% decline of profit was reported by the farms, which was 98% farms. So the similar was sales, as you understand, the production and sales are same, and profit was declined by 50% of the 69% farms reported. However, after strict lockdown, that was a limited lockdown period, 85 or 86% farms reported that their production declined by 33%. So it implies that about 13% farm were completely recovered, but most of the farms are partially recovering during the limited lockdown. And after lockdown reopening period, it's still 71% reported that they're about on average 23% production they lost during this period. So this is the scenario, but it also implies that farms are recovering slowly without lockdown, but it's still due to COVID outbreak, or it has certain impact on production and marketing and other sales. So there are some limited recovery in the periods. And we also looked at the percentage of farm that returns to their employees after the COVID outbreak, and you see that about during lockdown, 47% farms said that they have returns to their, particularly micro, small, medium. About 50% you can see that they have returned their some employees, but we did not ask them number of employees. But we observed that workers, mostly non-skilled workers, were retrenched at a higher proportion, as we have seen the previous paper, and similar results we have seen here in Bangladesh also. And in the subsequent periods also, there were some evidences of retrenchment of employees during the COVID outbreak. Now, next, our estimation strategy. Usually, we employed initially the OLS regression methods with or without agglomeration factors to assess whether the local market orientation help farms to recover faster way. So, and in the latter stage, we also check the robustness of by using instrumental variable regression, IV regression. The reason is that cluster or agglomeration economies has various endogenous effect on their farms' performance. So, therefore, to tackle that kind of endogeneity, we use some instrumental variables in the later stage. And the results we found almost the similar, and it is to some extent we think that the findings are robust. So this is the model. Our main outcome is refers to amount of production. Here we have just shown the production in the period 2020 compared to the period 2019. So it's a kind of proportion which has increased or decreased or remained same in different periods in 2020. Therefore, the production in 2020 was reported in relative terms in comparison with the production in 2019. The reported percentage of production in 2020 represent the percentage of recovery of production, because we asked them how much production you have recovered compared to pre-COVID level in 2029. Okay. For agglomeration variables, we particularly focused on two factors, as we mentioned. We did not focus on other factors. The reason is that it was the COVID that in fact affected the movement or mobility of farms in terms of their sourcing of raw materials and sales. So therefore, we focus these two, and also the reason is that, as I already mentioned, the objective of government to establish these industrial clusters in different districts in rural areas to exploit the local business opportunities so that they can flourish over the time. So this is one of the policy matters that you can look into this paper. We have also used for control variables, we, as usual, farm size, type of plot, and years of experience, change in farm's production process. These have been used. Marketing strategies. These have been used, mostly taking from the adjusted from the 2017 survey. For the instrumental variable instruments, as special distribution farms may be endogenous to farm recovery, as I mentioned, considering the possible endogeneity embedded into percentage of raw materials collected from local source and percentage of goods sold in own district, we use IB estimates. So we have used two types of instruments. One is COVID infection rates across districts, similar districts, and also we use the distance between and nearest local market and a squared distance to local market were used as 3 IBs for instrument as an instrument that to instrument the local source raw material sources. Okay, here you can see first the regression OLS results. As you see, the percentage of raw material collected from local source during first lockdown or strict lockdown, it has come out as positive 0.144. So that means that during the strict lockdown, percentage of raw material collection from local source have a significant impact on production process of the farms, and also similarly local market marketing also have a significant impact on the production during strict lockdown. This is the OLS result, but in other two periods we did not find the similar results, and other factors are here that you can see that farms have any change in production process, and other factors have also some contribution in the production during the lockdown and COVID outbreak.
Monzur, could you try to finish up in a minute or so?
Okay, sure. This is almost finished. So this is the instrumental variable regression. You can see that when we use the instruments, we have found that in all these three periods, raw material collection from the local source have been found very significant for their production recovery. So this is what we were anticipating, and we find that this is an important findings for managing this kind of pandemic-related crisis for the farms, particularly smaller farms. But we did not find the similar results for marketing of their goods, because once it is open up, I think they explore different markets, not only their own district. So that's why it did not came out as a significant. But raw materials sourcing from the local market was found as an important factor for recovering for their faster recovery during the pandemic. Okay, this is the main key findings that I have discussed here. So the main conclusion here we can draw that the industrial estates that were established to uncover location advantage in terms of market access, use of local labor, and other potentials, I think this has been found very effective in particularly this type of crisis when the mobility was restricted. And given the agglomeration benefits, choice of location, urbanization, infrastructure development are some of the important issues that might be considered while developing the industrial estates or expanding the industrial estates in developing countries like Bangladesh. So, but we could not explore other benefits of agglomeration due to unavailability of control farms here in our survey. But I think that could be an interesting exercise for others to see whether agglomeration benefits can help farms to recover, other agglomeration farms benefits can help recover farms in this pandemic. Almost that's from my side. Thank you so much for the patient hearing.
Okay, thanks very much, Monzur. And here to discuss the paper is Mushfiq Mobarak.
Thanks very much, Michael, for having me here. I hope my audio is clear. Is it? Okay. Can I get a thumbs up if people can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sure.
Okay. Thank you for the interesting paper. I'm hoping that rather than go on and give you 7 minutes straight of comments, I have things written down that I can share with the authors offline. I was hoping to just use this time to have a conversation because there's quite a few things that are still unclear to me after reading the paper and after seeing the presentation, and maybe for the entire audience it would be better if you can have a conversation so the authors can just clarify things, right? So first of all, congratulations on a nice paper. So lots and lots of researchers have been trying to track the effects of COVID, especially in low and middle income countries. A lot of our activities in low and middle income countries was focused on households, right? So increases in food insecurity, increases in unemployment risk, income risk, etc. Right? And it's good to see some attention to the firm side. I think that's been relatively less studied compared to household level effects of the pandemic. And the fact that these authors had some baseline data from 2017 prior to COVID for this particular sample is really useful, because then you can also study what the effect of the pandemic has been, looking at pre-post variation, right? Okay, and then the survey, basically asks about the losses experienced during lockdown and how quickly firms were able to recover. So that's the main main regressions that are being reported. Okay, so my first comment is, I think the use of the term agglomeration economies here is a misnomer. We should just drop it. I don't think this paper has anything to do with agglomeration. So it seems like, many of the firms are located in these estates, where there may be agglomeration benefits, but on the other hand, the authors are not using any variation between location in these estates versus outside. Right. As far as I understood, there's no data from firms that are outside, right? And therefore we can't really say anything about agglomeration at all. Okay. And so like labeling local market orientation as agglomeration, I think is not correct. Right. That's local market orientation can mean many different things. So we should just like get rid of the confusing terminology, because otherwise it'll just make us misinterpret what exactly we're learning. Okay, so the parts that I would, and then let me make a second comment about the instrument. It wasn't so clear reading the paper, but from the slide on the instrumental variable, I got a better idea just now. I think, using COVID infection rates as an instrument is not valid. That's not excludable. Of course, the district level or sub-district level COVID infection rates is going to affect firm recovery through many channels. Like that's one of the main things that is the effect of the pandemic, right? It could be simply, for example, the most direct effect of COVID infection rates would be, people are scared to come out because of the virus, and therefore there's less production happening. Okay, so that's not necessarily mediated through farms. So I don't think we can use that instrument. Yeah. Okay, so now, I'll just turn it over to the authors with some questions, so that maybe hopefully the whole audience can understand things better. So the main result is about firms' local market orientation. So what we are learning from the regressions. So I'm not sure I buy the IV regression, but from the OLS regressions, we are seeing a correlation that when certain firms have more local suppliers, right, they are able to recover faster than firms that don't have local suppliers, right? So that's an interesting and provocative result, and it behooves us to try and explore that in more detail. So the authors could really do the world a favor if you could help us understand what distinguishes firms that are locally oriented, local market oriented versus not, right? So is it the case that these firms are in slightly different sectors, right? Is it that when they're not local market oriented, they're export oriented? right? Or is that not a dimension we should be thinking about? Because export orientation could matter just because, for example, in Bangladesh, what happened early in the pandemic was a lot of the garment factory, the export orders were canceled, right? Even before the virus hit Bangladesh at all, even before there was a first case diagnosed, the country was already suffering because we're heavily reliant on textile exports, and orders got canceled right away, right? Or is it the case that local market orientation means not only that is it that you're sourcing raw materials locally, or are you selling to customers locally, right? And if that's the, whichever it is, right? Maybe the story is about, okay, look, when you don't need to travel very far to take your product to customers, those are the types of firms that suffered less during the pandemic, right? If you can understand that precise mechanism, right, that would really help, because for us to prepare for the next pandemic, or for us to figure out, what are the types of firms or types of individuals, types of employees that require most support during a pandemic, or even during this, this pandemic, unfortunately, is not even ending, right? There might be other, soon, we expect in South Asia to be another peak, with the Omicron variant. So we'd like to understand exactly who needs support. And so understanding, what are the types of firms that are more vulnerable or less vulnerable or self-protected, less susceptible to the pandemic, that'd be really useful. So maybe I'll just turn it over to the authors if you just want to help us understand who these firms are.
Should I say something, or it's okay?
Okay, thanks very much.